This is Alexis Mincolla from 3Teeth, and you're watching Industrial Music Culture. Pretty interesting. Growing up in the Boston area, and having a father who was like a holistic doctor. He's very much so into like, sort of like metaphysics and sort of like a lot of hippie stuff. Like I was born on a couch at home. Like I wasn't born in a hospital. So I think people thought I was kind of weird in that respect where, they thought my dad was like a witch doctor. Like now he's like on his like sixth book with like, Deepak Chopra writing the forward to it. So like, I feel like the word world now kind of validates that culture a little bit more, but being a doctor of alternative medicine and sort of bioenergetics and healing and stuff like that, 30 years ago was very weird, and people didn't really accept it as much. So I think it was interesting growing up around that type of thing. Like I remember being like 6 years old and being hooked up to like Kirlian photography electrodes to take pictures of my aura. And I remember like, even at the time, almost feeling like embarrassed of this stuff, because like, when you're a kid, you kind of just want to fit in. Like you want to go to church with your friends, but like I wasn't there at church on Sunday. Like, which, in retrospect, you look back to it and you go, man, thank God I wasn't. Cause like, I don't have any of that like weird hangups of like being forced to go to church that create like all sort of like weird, latent issues with people in life, from having like Catholic guilt and all sorts of strange shames and stuff like that. So, I didn't have any like religious background. My father used to take me to the Vedanta Center, which is like a Buddhist temple. So that was like the closest thing I had to any religious background. And, kind of having weird hippie parents, I think was a benefit in the long run for me. And then, just sort of like also maybe not the most well-behaved kid growing up. But in no more of like a, like I feel like growing up, you should be kind of a bad kid regardless. I feel like you're exploring your boundaries and stuff like that. So, I did get sent to boarding school as a result of that because I just was generally kind of skipping school a lot, which I think had a big effect on me because I absolutely hated it. But in the long run, I think it helped kind of create a lot of discipline in me. So I'm like a super hard worker. I feel like what I lack in talent, I make up for in very, very hard work. So I think those are sort of like some big points of who I am and where I'm from that sort of make up who I am now. So, I'm so bad with like years and times and ages and stuff like that, but I had an older brother growing up who was in bands and stuff like that, mostly metal bands, death metal bands. So I was exposed to like heavy music at a pretty young age. And I think getting into like heavy metal was sort of like my first passion. And then it's funny because one day I used to go in his room and like steal his CDs and just be like, "Go with this," and like put it in my CD player and stuff like that, a little IMC CD player. And I remember stealing the Downward Spiral from him. So whatever year that came out, which, obviously this isn't like, deep cut industrial here that we're talking about, but, I think that sort of set off a whole sort of deep inspection of like, what is this? Why does this sound like this? Why is it so, scathing and sort of nihilistic in ways that like, metal isn't? And I think that sort of, I'd never heard anything like that. And it kind of blew my mind. And I wanted to know more of what that was and where it came from, and the things that influenced that. And it sort of sent me down that rabbit hole, I suppose. And sort of having a love for industrial music and sound and some of the messaging that I think is very unique to industrial music, the social commentary of this stuff. And, yeah. So my father's a really great musician. My brother's a great musician. And it's funny because like, for me, like I had a deep passion for music, but I was like the person to like start their band the latest. My father had bands, my brother had bands, and I didn't have much of an interest in that type of thing. I really focused more on the visual arts in my life. And it wasn't until sort of later in life that I really decided to kind of pursue I wouldn't say I pursued a career in music, but I just said, hey, I want I want to get this stuff out of me. I have some things I need to say. In my band at the start, like this is my first band. So in many ways, you could say I was 30 when I decided to become a musician, or an artist, or whatever the fuck any of that stuff means. I mean, there's so many. I think I have to give a huge sort of nod to Ministry in this one. They've always been a band that I looked up to, and Al, who's luckily a dear friend of mine at this point, was such an inspiring character to me. And in many ways, I was also like, well, if this guy can do it, I can do it. Like there was that sort of thing, and I mean that in a disrespectful way. But yeah, there was just something about Ministry that really inspired me to kind of like do what I wanted to do. In many ways, also like there was a discontent of like sort of like you can only listen to so many Ministry records, you can only listen to so much back catalog, other things. I didn't really think anyone was making the type of music that we made, especially with our first record. So I think a lot of it was born out of like a discontent with what was sort of being offered currently, and maybe trying to fill that void. For myself, like I think the whole first record was just like we just wrote it for ourselves to listen to, and never really had any expectations of what we did with our project. The fact that anyone else liked it or gave a shit about it was a huge bonus. Like we had never said, hey, we should do this for a career, we should do this for lives. It was just like bucket list, like, hey, let's write an industrial record because we have some time to do it, and I think we can make something from it. In terms of bands, again, I don't know, like I was a big fan of, like I said, Ministry, Nail Bomb was a band I really liked in terms of crossing over metal and industrial, which was a really cool project of some of the guys from Sepultura. I believe even like Reese Fulber played in the project for a second. Yeah, no, I can honestly, the list could go on, but we'll keep it short. I was in like 2011. I was throwing a party in downtown LA called Lil Death, and Lil Death was sort of like I'm not sure how I can describe it, but it was an interesting sort of I guess venue for like-minded artists to meet up, sort of this underground thing where we were sort of like slamming together different points of culture, from like underground techno to industrial to sort of like like the witch house scene at that time was actually like a thing, like or it's probably hard to explain as well, but like there's some really cool sort of witch house music coming out at the time period, and then mixing it in with like the early mean streets of the internet, and then kind of colliding all these things, giving it an aesthetic, giving it a home, giving it a place for all these artists to kind of come in and play. And I had put that together, and it was sort of like mostly just a hobby to get everyone together, and it served as a meeting ground for the band. And from there it was like almost like using the soundscape of that moment in time to kind of create some of the things that we were doing. First album was the self-titled that came out in, I think, 2013, 2014. We had finished the whole record, and I remember like really wanting to have it out on vinyl. So I kind of wanted to shop it to some small indie labels and stuff like that. There's a really cool label called Artifact Records based out of Toronto. And I somehow got in touch with them, I forget how. And I had sent him, the album that we had produced and mixed and mastered ourselves, and entirely done in-house, did all the art, like everything we had just done ourselves. And, Yasik, who was the head of the label, he was like, hey, this is really cool. We're interested in releasing it. He's like, what are you looking for? And I was like, honestly, I just want to make vinyl. Like that was such an important part of me, because I remember like you know, my brother telling me when I was a little kid, he's like, it's not final till it's on vinyl. Like that like stuck with me. So I just really wanted, like, you know, I didn't know if we were going to do more records. I didn't know if anything was going to matter after that. I just wanted to like have a vinyl of like this album that we did, something like I could look back on when I was like old and be like, oh, there's my record I did. So he was like, yeah, we don't do vinyl releases for debut albums. And I was like, why? He's like, well, we don't know how much they're going to sell, and vinyl's expensive to press and all this stuff. And I was like, if you press the vinyl, I will guarantee that we'll sell it. And if I don't sell it, then I'll buy it back from you. And he goes, okay, fair enough. And I was like, oh shit. So like now I'm going to get stuck with having to spend like thousands of dollars on vinyl if it doesn't sell. So it sort of created a little bit of fire under my ass to go out there and like pound the pavements and create some sort of hype and create like, you know, some visual propaganda, if you will, to help kind of like, you know, create a demand for the record. And my background being more visual arts focused and stuff like that allowed me to sort of use my skill set to kind of create a lot of sort of hype online. And lo and behold, like when the record came out, it was like sold really well. It still does sell very well. People really like that. And we've done about 6 different vinyl pressings for it. I've seen aftermarket vinyl go for like $1,000 on eBay, which is insane. Don't ever pay for that. We'll probably do another pressing at some point. But strangely enough, we just got the masters back on our first record because it was a 7-year deal. And I don't know where the fuck time goes, but apparently 7 years has already passed. And now we own the masters of our first record, which is pretty cool because if we want to re-release it, self-release it, and produce file, whatever, it's like we just own the masters, which is it's pretty exciting. Never is a record, never sign a record deal that gives away, you know, exploitation rights in perpetuity to your music. It's a very bad idea. So even if it's a 15-year deal, a 20-year deal, just never do it forever. So yeah, you know, it was a reasonable success. And if someone had told me that, hey, you're going to tour this first album that you're going to make with Tool, we probably would have taken a little bit more time. Like there's songs that like we forgot a bass line on. You know what I mean? We're like, oh yeah, we should have put a bass line on this. Because you're going to realize that when you're out there touring it, playing arenas. So I guess, yeah, our first real tour was, you know, we'd gone out there and done like runs. You know, we do like runs. And I used to book the band myself. We didn't have a booking agent, we didn't have a manager. And I would just like talk to various promoters and stuff online and sort of route my own version of a tour. And we'd get in a bus or a van rather, I'd drive it. And, you know, we would just do that thing that bands do where you just get in a van and you show up to places. Hopefully, you know, the promoter does decide to pay you. Hopefully anyone shows up. And, you know, that stuff's real tough. And, you know, that's the stuff where bands sort of like earn their credibility in my mind. Like if you're not getting in a van, booking your own shows, going out there and playing in front of small amounts of people because you love it, then like, I don't know if you deserve to be in a band. And that shit is so hard. It is such a grind. Now, you know, we have a booking agent, a good manager, and like, you know, we get to go on tour buses and stuff like that. It's still a grind, but like, you know, you just have to put in your tour of duty of doing everything your fucking self and creating that demand, you know, because no one wants to. No, people think they're going to get signed and like the thing that's going to sign them is going to go out there and make them like big and famous. It just doesn't work like that. It's like you got to go out there and create your demand and create your culture and create your sort of equity in your project. And then maybe record labels will give a shit about you because no, they don't want to deal with pre-sold product. They want like you to do all that stuff and then they'll help amplify a little further, which is never going to be worth the fucking, you know, points that they take from you. But, you know, keep my cards a little close to my chest when it comes to stuff about the new album because, you know, what we've published already with regards to this single, yes, Mick Gordon is co-producing the record. We've been working with him for like a year now. This record is taking a very long time. There's a lot of cooks in the kitchen, which is cool, sometimes frustrating. Also working a lot non-locally because of COVID and generally people being in different places. So doing a lot of this, a lot of Zoom stuff, which sometimes, you know, can never replace being in the room with people and working. That makes things move a lot faster. So this post-geographical existence sometimes makes things move slower. But yeah, I'm really stoked with how this is coming out. We're really pushing ourselves on this record to try different things. We've had a ton of time, which has been really rare for us, through the pandemic, for everything to sort of allowing us to really focus on trying different things and pushing sort of sonic boundaries and getting experimental. And normally we don't have this much time because it's always like we're up against, we have to go out and tour, and it's hard to write when you're on tour. At least for me, it is. Maybe some people. No, Mick's awesome. He's definitely he's a special dude. He's really funny, and he's just absolutely brilliant. Like he's such a mad scientist, like he just like puts on the lab coat and goes to work in his like laboratory down there in Australia and just makes really cool stuff. And he's like a big conceptual thinker. So like, when I put I actually mapped out an entire document of the record before we started writing, which is actually a 9-foot document, and each song is about, it's like, and it goes up through this, like, I might have to release it at some point, but like, we basically mapped everything out conceptually on the new record before we started writing. And I think that's what really got him excited and motivated to go, I want to be part of this, because I think he's used to like, scoring to picture and scoring to video game concept, and, allowing himself to say, here's what the concept is. Now let me like explore that concept sonically. So, providing really cool visuals for him, I think really helps him. For me, I'm not really sure how somebody could make an album that isn't a concept. I feel like that's why you'd make an album. So all my albums are concept albums, I think like Shutdown.exe was very much so a concept album. The whole thing was sort of this like formula for, dismantling reality tunnels and stuff like that. And, it's quite obvious when you listen to the lyrics and stuff like this. But yeah, I mean, everything we do it always has like a conceptual North Star as a point of guidance to sort of say, here's what we're doing. Here's what this is supposed to, like we don't write just sort of haphazardly and just like crank out songs and see how they fit together. There's always an idea. There's always some sort of visual as well. And, it really helps us to create a language of like, making sure something sounds like how it looks, etc. So yeah, I mean, we always do that. Like I said, my background being more of a visual artist, it's something where it's an advantage to our creative process. Yeah, developing a universe, and that's something that we constantly are doing with like various characters, and even our music videos, they all kind of tie into like a similar universe. Yeah, there's plenty of rabbit holes to go down. I like to stretch, for one. I like to get into my own headspace in terms of like, I like hanging out before the show, but like maybe 30 minutes before the show, kick everyone out of the green room and then really get focused. And, I like burning some Palo Santos, or like some I guess, olfactory cues for kind of getting me in the zone and stuff like that. So nothing too crazy, but yeah. For one, I like graphic design. I love sort of creating in any facet. I love like, producing and creating and editing video and all those things. I also am like a real sort of like technically minded person where like I like building stuff. I like, working on cars a little bit, like big firearms enthusiast. I like building guns. I like shooting guns. I like, fine tuning sort of like the precision aspects of a weapon system and stuff like that. So. I'm not good with favorites questions because I feel like it's always kind of like changing a lot. But favorite drink, we're gonna go with coffee right now. I like cold brew, black coffee. It's like that's something that for me, like I absolutely need. Upgrade on that like coffee. And then favorite food, we'll go with steaks. I like steaks. I like a nice, like a bone-in ribeye steak. My roommate has a big husky named Raw, so she's like the house pet. I personally don't have any pets of my own because as a touring artist, it's really hard. Aside from having been home for the past 6 months because of COVID, I'm usually like on the road so much, and it would be irresponsible, I think, to just like have an animal and just like neglect it while you're on tour and stuff like that. So I love pets. I like cats and dogs both a lot. So it's nice to have a pet in the house and not be so like I get to be the cool uncle as opposed to the dad. I do have family. I don't have any family in Los. Oh, I guess I have family in Los Angeles. I have an uncle who lives out here and some cousins and stuff like that who migrated out here from the Boston area as well. You know, all my family's in Boston. I like a lot of non-industrial artists. I like a lot of like just sort of like I like some electronic stuff. I was listening to some Calm Cruise chilling out the other day. That's certainly not industrial. I was listening to some Steely Dan the other day. I'm a big fan of some like old, more kind of, you know, chilled out stuff. It's funny, like when you make really heavy music, when you're constantly performing very heavy music, I find myself listening to less heavy music. Maybe sort of like if you worked at an ice cream shop, you probably wouldn't eat as much ice cream anymore. Kind of toasted from like making super heavy aggressive stuff and playing, etc. So I like to listen to sort of like more palate cleansing stuff. And I also find that like if you're making like sort of like that type of music, you don't want to be too influenced by that type of music. It's better to draw inspiration, especially, you know, looking at songwriting arrangements from like very different types of music as opposed to like, you know, if you're listening to industrial, you'll like cannibalize that while making that. You're like, oh shit, I just kind of like, you, especially if you listen to a lot of Nine Inch Nails, you will eventually just make, you know, and Trent covered so much territory that like no matter what, you're like, oh, that progression, no, that's Trent. You're like, oh, this no, that's Trent. You're like, fuck, he did everything. So like, it's almost like you can't listen to any of that shit. I mean, I got to go with Ministry just as my sort of main one, just because I got to stay faithful to my Uncle Al. You know, like Skinny Puppy, we got to give the credit, you know, the credit is due. The Skinny Puppy, and I want to throw out something like Chem Lab or something like that, just for the sake of giving them a shout. You know, because I do think there's like a couple Chem Lab songs that I have on repeat. You know?
In Ministry.
I do and I don't. Like to me, it's like it's always so like momentary. Like I've had venues that I've like, oh, I love playing here, and then like I've played it again. And I'm like, it wasn't great. You know what I mean? Like, so I guess it's like very like moment to moment and sort of like the context and the sort of situational experience of it that always changes it. Because like, you know, I played in venues that I've like terrible experiences and then played them again. And I'm like, this is the best. So like, you know, yeah, I mean, I don't really try and play favorites with that stuff. You know, there's certainly been venues that I'm like, I will never play there again. Mainly because, you know, usually difficult loadings or a crazy staircase with no elevator or something. You know. So I love Wasteland Weekend. You know, Jared, who started that festival, is a friend of mine, and you know, they always ask us to do it. It's something we do, and it's never for like the money. Nor does it really sound good out there, but it's such a cool immersive experience. I just love, like, it feels like the end of the world when you're there. Like burnt gasoline and plastic fills the air, and you know, there's this general, like, it doesn't feel like some sort of festival that just like slapped together. Like you feel like you're like in like Fallout, the game or something like that. That's actually how I got Mick Gordon's contact, and we were on tour, and we had a day off because our show in Milan got canceled because of COVID. So we took the day off in Frankfurt to go visit the Bethesda headquarters because they invited us to go there. And so we got to go play the new Doom before it came out. And my friend at Bethesda, we kind of just hung out all day there. And I was like, hey, would you give me Mick Gordon's email? And she was like, yeah, but you didn't get it from me. And I was like, cool. And then one day out in the desert, after a few whiskeys, and we were all just like referencing some Mick Gordon stuff, I was like, you know, I got the dude's email. I'm just going to shoot him a note right now. You know, thinking to myself, hey, you know, what's the worst that's going to happen? He's not going to respond or say no. And then the next day he responded like, yo, what a pleasure to find you in my inbox. Huge fan. This sounds amazing. Let's do it, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, cool. I guess, you know, you got to shoot your shot or you never know. To not hold on to any belief so sacredly. The idea that, like, you know, question everything, sort of reconsider things, look at the opposite side, try and find counter arguments. You know, never just hold anything as absolute. I find that it's that type of thinking that sort of, you know, manages to make this world a more miserable place. So try and consider the other side. That don't get discouraged. Don't compare yourself to other projects. You know, it's unfortunate that we live in a time period where music and art has so many sort of numbers metrics, but those things don't matter. Make your art because it means something to you. Be passionate about it. You know, it's a grind. It's not going to happen overnight. And just keep doing what you do because you have to do it because it keeps you alive. Because it gives you a sense of purpose. You never know whose day it's brightening, who's going through a really hard time. And I think that this type of art is important to the human experience, in particular some of the shadow work that has to be done. So I think that, you know, just keep doing your thing. Thanks for watching, Industrial People. This is Alexis Mincolla from 3Teeth. We're here for you.